Like one of the things that frustrates me to no end is in the airport, the moving sidewalks.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
When people stand on them.
Yeah.
Like
their
that's
whole
not
point
the
to get you there faster.
The point is to get you there faster, but everyone gears down. Or they walk so slowly on it that they turn it into an obstacle course. You have to shove your way through it. And then I just walk on the thing and walk past on the normal floor and walk past them anyways because everyone's going so goddamn slow and they're getting in the way.
Bringing you a reasoned approach to health and fitness. This is the Phi Life Podcast.
Welcome to the Phi Life Podcast. I'm John Barban. With me is Brad Pilon. And today we want to remind you of what matters when it comes to diet and fitness and health, and not to get caught up in the minutia of reading about it or constantly scanning headlines. And I guess theoretically you could kill all day on the various social media platforms and always come up with something new, something different, something that sounds like you should be doing it.
Yeah.
That's coming from a credible source. And it's hard for you to know, like, I better take action on that right now. And not get, and we're trying to remind you like that all of that's minutia if you haven't got the pillars in place. And the pillars being, are you getting to the gym regularly or doing some kind of exercise? It doesn't have to be at the gym.
Why the minutia exists and why your favorite influencers eventually going to fall from grace is because if you work in this, like John and I work in this industry, is what we do, right? John, I don't run a landscape company on the side or anything. It's just what we do. So we have to think of things to talk to you about for decades. Like I've written an obscene amount of emails and newsletters and stuff like that. And so we start chasing things that are interesting to us. And then in order to make it interesting to you, sometimes and we get excited about what we write about. So sometimes we get a little bit hypey in the way we talk about it. But other influencers now have to take that to the next level because there's so many voices. So you have to become very, very excited, very, very hypey about a little piece of minutia. It's interesting, but it's not a big rock. And that can get really distracting because more often than not, these little pieces of exciting minutia are way more interesting than just go to the gym and eat less. Right?
Yeah, right.
And in order to make your minutia, your little rock seem important, you start every newsletter or every podcast with the whole diet and exercise are important, but they're not everything. And calories in, calories out is very nuanced. And going to the gym, the order of exercises can make or break you, just to kind of set up that you need to do more than the big rocks. So read my article. But more often than not, it does harm because it moves you away from the big rocks.
Yeah. And I don't really know the way around this one.
No.
You just have, so all we're going to do is remind you what the rocks are. And if you don't have those in place, the minutia's kind of not going to matter. And it only ever would matter if you do have the rocks in place. So it's just a reality check here. Like if you make it to the gym on a regular basis or some kind of exercise, you don't have to go to the gym. That's one of them.
Yeah.
And that's purposeful exercise. We'll call it the gym.
Yeah.
And some amount of weight training to stimulate muscle growth or muscle preservation, depending what stage of life you're at.
Yep.
And strength growth, gaining strength and or strength preservation. That is a cornerstone that has to be in place. Most people don't do it, but that has to be in place.
Yeah. And I guess we've always had weight training as a big rock. And I'm not minutiaing it, but there's two components to that big rock. And one is muscle mass, but the other one is muscle strength and power, or muscle quality, I guess. Right? You need to maintain both. And neither one, I think, is more important than the other. I mean, we could debate that on a different podcast, but sort of muscle health in general, right? You got to have muscle and it has to be functioning properly. So
right.
That's the total muscle big rock.
And ideally, you're building it and preserving it at a higher level.
Yes.
Some people can fool themselves into thinking their exercise routine, because it exhausts them and they can feel some kind of maybe burn, that it's building muscle. But there's a very specific way to train to build muscle, and that needs to be in your routine at some point. If your goal is to maximize what you can do with your health and what you can do with your longevity, I always say this: if you don't care, you don't have to do any of this. But if somewhere in there you want to maximize your health span, what they call it now, weight training is a must for the purpose of bone density and preserving and building muscle mass.
Yeah.
So you can go do all kinds of different types of training and cross training that feels intense, and then you go measure on a DEXA and you haven't built any muscle at all. Like that's not going to do it. You have to train for muscle mass as one component, one important component on top of or as part of your routine. You can go do all that other stuff, but it's not going to build muscle mass.
Yeah, and I want to dig into that because it's, I'm partly to blame this. I talk about just challenging your muscles as being important. But I think when it comes to building muscle and realizing that bodybuilding figured out a very specific prescription for building muscle, but it's not just exercise. Because if you look at a martial artist, right, who might punch a punching bag or kick a punching bag, kick a kicking bag, anyway, for like thousands of times throughout a week, they don't just develop massive legs. They develop very powerful muscles and very efficient kicks, but their legs just don't get bigger and bigger and bigger until they look like cattle, right?
Right.
Other exercises, climbers, rock climbers, very, very strong grip, maybe slightly larger than average forearms and a muscular back that you can see, but not bodybuilding size, right? So it's not just about doing challenging work over and over and over for hours and hours and on end. There is a very specific way that the bodybuilding works to grow a muscle mass. And people argue over the sarcoplasmic versus sarcomere growth and true muscle growth. It's related to strength versus untrue muscle growth, which is just mass. But, when we get down to the health effects of muscle, it is divided into, it has to be strong. And it also has to be there. So there is a definite role for just bodybuilding style building muscle mass. And not every exercise that challenges the muscle is a bodybuilding or muscle building exercise. I hope that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you like doing CrossFit type stuff or cross training and it feels good and that's all you have time for, that's still better than nothing. But just be aware it's not building muscle the way a dedicated muscle building program would do.
Yeah, you can phase in and out. You can stack them on top of each other, but just don't completely neglect one for the other.
Right. Yeah. Again, if your goal is to maximize health span and what exercise can do for you, and building muscle, we think is the most important thing for that for long term health. Yeah. So you just have to understand that there's a way to do that, and it takes a specific, a dedicated training program, or at least part of your program, for the express purpose of building muscle.
Yeah. So, and if you do what John and I do, and you get a DEXA once a year, once every couple of years, and then if your muscle mass goes down, you have to switch up your training to build that back up. Hopefully, you're not so old that you can't do that. And if your muscle mass is where you want it to be, then hey, play with other stuff if you want to, but maintain that muscle mass.
Yeah, and we've talked about using appendicular lean mass or a different the lean mass index to find out like where are you on the spectrum of how much muscle mass do I actually have versus what we assume to be a genetic limit at your height and size. Assuming average, assuming you're not an outlier. But if you were an outlier, you kind of would know that. But if you've been training for any length, 5-6 years and started somewhere in your late teens, early 20s, and you were pushing it hard for muscle building, you're probably already close to your genetic max to begin with. And I know that sounds short, but it happens that quickly. And then at that point, your goal is to just keep it there. So you can add in all kinds of different training for interest's sake, but building the muscle and then keeping it there is one of the key things that exercise can do for you for longevity.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've got that. Then we've talked about just movement. So basically just walking, gardening, that kind of thing, but maintaining, that's almost the bulk of your diet, because you can get away with 4 hours a week of weight training and have it be really, really effective.
Yeah.
You're not doing 4 hours of movement in a week is not a good goal, right? It should be just as much as you can get in a day, whether it just be walking or doing chores or moving around. I read an interesting post or maybe it's a podcast, but it was someone talking about that we have more of a low energy epidemic, like just people not having the energy to do anything. And I always think about back in university when, if I gave you 15 hours to study for a test, you're going to take 15 hours to study for a test. If I'm like, John, you got to test in 2 hours, you're going to study in 2 hours, you're going to get it done. So whatever space you have. So if you're used to being that type of person who moves around and does stuff throughout the day, you're going to move around and do stuff throughout the day. But if you're just if that space is just taken up with just you doing nothing, you're used to that. You're going to take up all that space doing time and space doing nothing. So it's important to build in a lifestyle that's not a low energy lifestyle, that you're the type of person who does stuff. Now, there's nothing wrong with sitting on the couch and watching a show, even for a couple hours. You've got 24 in a day, but that just means that you need a couple other hours of when you're doing stuff every day.
Yeah, and the problem there is people's jobs usually chew up so many hours
so
of their
much
day,
time. Yeah.
And then some other commitments, and then you're telling them, oh, and then go be active for the rest of the time.
Yeah.
And they can still feel exhausted, even if their job's not physically exhausting.
Mental work is tough. So here's a good one. The 8-hour workday was designed based around kind of the physical limits of someone working on a line for 8 hours. It wasn't based on how much mental work a person could do in a day. And one of the suggestions right now is asking people to do mentally demanding work, as simple as a spreadsheet. But for 8 hours is just, it's crushing in terms of how much energy you have left. Like you just can't do mental work that much, right? So,
well, like you said, and physically you're in a sedentary position that your body gets used to being in those positions.
You're used to that low energy state. Yeah.
Yeah, I think part of the reason many people struggle to sleep is because they don't expend enough actual physical energy in a day.
100%.
So they've never truly been awake for the day.
So this is one of those really big rocks when people will look to, it's odd, but you'll look to every possible vitamin or mineral possible deficiency as a reason for your low energy. But oddly, your low energy might just be habitual from you doing low energy stuff. So the big rock of moving around and getting used to being more of a high energy person, not like hyperactive bouncing off the walls, Brad Pilon stuff, but just like doing stuff during the day, might actually thus increase your base level of feeling energy more than the minutia of trying to figure out what specific combo of minerals is making you tired.
Yeah, and this obviously before the Industrial Revolution, this was just forced upon you for how you had to get by.
Yeah.
But now we can live a life completely sedentary just because of the way society has evolved, and just conveniences take away the need for labor for at least a lot of people.
So that every little bit of labor is exhausting.
Right. And it doesn't seem like there's a fit, or it seems wrong or unfair or just like a BS proposition to go work all day long to earn money, to come home to have to work to maintain your body.
Yeah.
Whereas they used to be the same thing. Like what you did all day long to provide for your family, provide food, whatever, was also what maintained your body. But they're disjointed now.
You earned your dinner because you just worked for 8 hours, right? Now we're like, well, I just sat on sat in my cubicle for 8 hours, then sat on the couch for 2, and now I'm going to eat a massive meal. Yeah. Anyway, so big rock there is movement. Is just finding, and again, we've already talked about your structured workouts, which is like your weight training stuff. This can be as simple as like do the laundry, put the mulch in your garden, go for a walk. It doesn't have to be join a cycling club.
That's a good point. Movement is completely different than dedicated specific exercise. That's why I said earlier, dedicated actual like targeted specific exercise is one thing. Movement, just take the stairs if you can, park further away. All of those stupid things matter. And the more movement you get throughout the day, the better. Even if it's in tiny little chunks, 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, overall it matters to your system.
Yeah.
But again, we have to make a conscious decision, because you can live your whole life not doing much movement. Like one of the things that frustrates me to no end is in the airport, the moving sidewalks.
Oh yeah.
When people stand on them.
Yeah.
Like
their whole point to get you there faster.
The point is to get you there faster, but everyone gears down, or they walk so slowly on it that they turn it into an obstacle course. You have to shove your way through it. And then I just walk on the thing and walk past on the normal floor and walk past them anyways, because everyone's going so goddamn slow and they're getting in the way. And it almost, it's kind of depressing that the human condition is to do as little as possible at every opportunity.
Yeah.
And that made sense. We're obviously evolved to do it because we used to spend all day spending a ton of energy just to survive. Now we spend almost no energy, but we're still evolved to rest whenever we can rest.
Yeah.
And it's just, I don't know, knowing how bad things are and knowing that the society makes it that easy. And then you see one of those sidewalks, and instead of using it for the purpose of getting somewhere faster, people just gear down and just stand still again.
Yeah,
It reminds me of a Wall-E movie, right? The people in the
that
chairs.
Is such a good movie. It's so for that exactly that. For you guys who think he's exaggerating, I will video one day John Barban in an airport watching people on those moving sidewalks and watch just how livid he gets. Yeah,
it's so bad. Well, because it ruins it for me. I want to use them, but people either stand on them or walk so slowly that it's like not even worth it.
He gets so mad.
Just have to shove your way through them. Oh, don't get me started about airports. Like people don't respect personal space in airports at all.
Oh, God, you getting coffee in the airport? That's my other favorite one, because for some reason in the airport, Tim Hortons or Starbucks, wherever we are. Yeah, to your point, you crush in more, so the line is just this denser line of people at any coffee shop in an airport, and it's drives you nuts.
Waiting in line at the airport, I've had someone who was on their phone, and it was resting on my back while they were texting on their phone. That's how close they were to me.
Paid to see that. That would have been amazing.
And I just kind of shrugged. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, you don't recognize that you're touching somebody you don't know? Like, that's so weird. So when people get too close behind me, like when you can feel their breath, and I'm like, what are you doing? With standing in line, I just turn around and face them.
I'm going to do,
that's the only moment when they realize how awkwardly close they're standing to you. And then they're like, oh, and then they start backing up. But you shouldn't be like within 2 inches of somebody else.
No.
Because no matter how far behind me you are, you're still next in line.
Okay, we're going to do the next 2 big rocks, but I guarantee all of you, we're going to do an airport episode with John. Watch him go. So
anyways, all right, well, sorry.
Okay, so those are 2. So you've got your structured exercise, which is for us mostly weight training. But then you have your movement. And if you have those 2 down, then you can play with anything else you want. And it's okay. If you start replacing those 2 things with minutia or fun new shiny objects, that's when it starts to fall apart. And I'm going to give an example, and people are going to hate me on this one, but more often than not, I've found that people we know and the people we worked with, when they start introducing HIIT training, they get into Tabata or they get into the whole idea of like HIIT training, they end up so exhausted. It's such a disruption to their energy systems that then they don't weight train and they drastically decrease their daily movement because they're exhausted from it. So it replaces their walking, it replaces their gardening and doing their laundry, but also kind of replaces part of their workout. And you actually see this sort of detrimental effect. Like they have a bit more endurance in that specific motion of doing high intensity work, but physically they don't look as sharp, and from an energy point of view, they're almost lower energy all day. So
you got to
be careful. Yeah. So you have to maintain those rocks. Then if you want to add new things in, add them in. But pay attention. If you become in a low energy state again because of the things you've added in, that's not the goal of this, right?
No.
Part of health span is being able to having the energy to do the stuff you want to do, right? So I'm not going to tell you how old my mom is because she would kill me, but she's in Iceland right now, maybe like on her way to the Arctic to do an Arctic expedition, right? You want that level of energy at my mom's age, 30 something.
We're assuming if you're here listening, that's part of your goal, is to be energetic for as long as you can throughout your life.
But it becomes a goal. If it's not your goal now, the issue is it becomes your goal later. It will eventually become your goal, because we do have what's called the health gap. So we've increased the average life expectancy in North America and lots of other areas in the world by a couple of years, but we have not increased the health expectancy. So you're healthy and mobile and able to do things up until about 66. That's always sort of been it. But we've increased the life expectancy up to the late 70s. So you have almost a decade gap there where you're alive, but you're not necessarily healthy. So we're trying to fill that in. So if it's not important now, it will be as you get closer to that.
You're dramatically crossing things off the list that you can accomplish or do or partake in, which we're saying if you stick to these pillars, you can extend that.
Yeah. Okay. So those are our movement ones. And then our diet ones are pretty simple. The first one is just calories. I mean, above and beyond is it organic? Is it natural? What are my ratios? What kind of soil was it grown in? It really is just how much am I eating? And
it's
why?
99.5% how much are you eating? It just doesn't matter what you eat. If you don't have what you eat under control, if you don't have how much you eat under control, what you eat won't matter.
Yeah, and everyone will tell you, and maybe I'm sure I've said it somewhere in the 20 plus years we've been online, right? Where it's like, wow, it's like I could eat as much as I wanted and still lost weight. We often say that based on personal experience because we just tried something new and we've done it for 6 or 7 weeks, maybe, and we started off really lean, right? And so even if you jump from 10 to 13%, you still felt like you ate whatever you wanted. You know, like it's a time constrained statement on trying a new diet.
Yeah, right.
But it never really works out. Or you're just pitching something you're eventually going to sell, right? So whether or not you are vegan, you are carnivore, whatever you are, eventually the total intake catches up to you, right? Because we've done them both. I'm still vegan. It's been like a decade, and within that decade, my weight has fluctuated. There's been times where I've been like, I got to tighten this up, right? So there was no magic combo of fruits and veggies. It was just way too much stuff, right? So keep that under control. And the key, there's 2 ways you can do that. You're either a spreadsheet person who likes to track stuff, or you're a Goldilocks person and you learn what too little, too much, and just right feels like. I'm a Goldilocks, right? Like, so I'm more in tune with, okay, that's too much. I'm done. I'm done eating for today. It could be 4 p.m. I could know, like, I am done eating. I've eaten too much. Or it could be 10:30 at night and be like, I'm still kind of empty, right? So, or you don't have that and you need spreadsheets. Either one is fine, but have some sort of awareness of how much you're eating.
Right. And obviously that's way easier said than done. And that's why that's why the entire weight loss industry exists.
Yep.
And whatever technique you need to use, if you care at all about this, you have to eventually figure out how much you're eating and accept that if you're eating too much, it's going to affect eventually your health span and lifespan. And if you want to improve on that, at some point you have to get calories under control. And it doesn't matter what the calories are. And if you spend time fiddling with what the calories are, it's that you're just missing the whole point. The whole point is total calories first, and then you can fiddle with what the calories are.
Yeah. And then and in general, the amount of training that most people listening here do in a week isn't going to change your calorie needs very much. It's sort of that misnomer. Now, if you're we have a friend, Rachel, who does like pickleball, like almost pro level pickleball. She does tournaments where she plays like 8 hours a day for multiple days. In that phase, she probably needs to eat a bit more. And she knows, right? You can feel
it's a bit.
I know, right? But then for the rest of us who do an hour in the gym Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and some walking, just don't count it, right? Just work with your calories. Yep. So that's your third big rock. And then your fourth one's your protein, right? And it shouldn't have to be a rock because the overall average protein intake in the States is 90 grams, which is right around where you and I recommend it. The issue is that 90 grams comes from 3,700 calories, which is about 1,000 higher than most people would ever need, right? The other issue is that while that's the average, it doesn't mean that anyone's eating 90. You get that because a lot of people are eating way more than 90. And then you have this subset of people who can eat an entire day's worth of food and get 30 grams of protein somehow.
Yeah.
Right. So
we've worked with those people, and I remember
it's amazing.
I remember working with a woman who's like that, and I couldn't figure out why her workouts were killing her, and she was so exhausted, and she was talking about a kind of muscle ache that I just wasn't. I'm like, what is it? The delayed onset muscle sore? She's like, no, it's this other kind of. There's this ache and this
heavy,
exhaustion.
achy. Yeah.
I just couldn't figure out what was going on, and then I thought, wait, could you actually be like under like protein malnourished, like literally not eating enough protein? And so we did a diet record recall thing for like a week, and she was eating 25 grams of protein a day.
I
couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, you're
it's
actually
not on purpose.
Protein malnourished. I didn't even know that was a thing in the industrialized world. And so I said, just drink one protein shake. You don't even have to force. You don't change your diet at all, because she wasn't gaining.
One protein shake doubles her protein for the day, right?
Like she's like, oh wow, that really worked. And I couldn't believe it was that simple, because I come from a bodybuilding background where everyone just eats way too much protein, or at least that's never a problem. So it was kind of jarring to me to have a client who actually was undernourished with protein. And so you can, I've never experienced it, but you can feel a complete exhaustion just by not having enough protein.
Yeah, totally. So you get those 4 rocks in, you're 95, 96% of the way. And if you only using those rocks, you can get in a really great shape. Right. And
then the final thing I'll say about getting into the minutia, I mean, we sell minutia, right?
Oh yeah.
Like all of our
but once those
products
rocks are in there,
everything we
minutia.
sell and have created for the last 25 years is the 5%, like the little bits
Yeah.
you fill in at the end.
Yeah.
But you can't, it's likely that you can't tell which of those things you need without having the other pillars in place first.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like once you have your training in place, some kind of dedicated exercise directed at some amount of hypertrophy and some amount of whatever you just want to do for exercise, and you've got your daily movement in place, you've got your calories. Let's say you've got your calories under control. You know how much you need in a day. And let's say you also have your protein under control. Only then can you have at least remotely a clear picture of like, oh, you know what? I think I actually need more vitamin D, or I think I might actually I could really benefit from, I don't know, creatine, or just any of these other things. Like maybe you should take magnesium before bed. You won't know that if all of that stuff's not in place.
Things that are, sort of health darlings right now, like getting great sleep. I think you need I think you need to know sleep's important. But if you have those 4 big rocks in place and things are still not working and you're still not sleeping well, then you have an issue. I think if you have those 4 rocks in place, you're going to be sleeping well. But if you're not, because of something's keeping you from sleeping, now it's okay. We're looking at your tech use and stuff like that. But
right.
Your point, the minutia becomes possibly important, but at least identifiable if the big rocks are there. If the big rocks are not there, it's just a beach of sand that you're trying to like pick pieces out and figure. It's
easy to get caught up in the minutia because the minutia is easy. There's no effort. You just read a bit or watch a podcast and then go buy a supplement or change to organic or grass fed or whatever, or switch your oils out for different oils. None of that requires effort. You're not going to have to sweat. You're not going to have to make harder decisions about total calories. You're not going to have to make harder decisions about alcohol or how much to have. It's or movement. It's like, oh yeah, I really should take the stairs this time. Like all of the pillars require some amount of effort. The minutia is easy, and everyone will spend way too much time talking or thinking about the minutia without ever having the rocks in place, because the rocks take effort. Like we said at the beginning, you got to go to work all day long, maybe commute, deal with a family thing or whatever, and then also work out. It's like, oh man, that sucks. Can I just take something?
Yeah.
So, but if the easy way it's not going to get you anywhere. And like we said, it only helps at the end once you have the tough stuff in place.
Yeah. And the tough stuff is incredibly boring. It's boring to talk about. It's not good podcast fodder. It's not good articles.
Nope.
For anyone.
That's why we're so small here, because we only talk about we're always bringing it back to just this point. Yeah. Like I think no matter what we talk about, we end up right back here.
Yeah. And what I like about the 4 big rocks is that if things aren't going well, if you're not looking the way you want to look or feeling the way you want to feel, you can automatically just go 4 things and be like, hey, are my workouts going well? Okay, am I moving? How's my protein? How are my calories? Almost always before you get to the minutia, one of those is off. And you're like, oh yeah, okay.
Okay, so I have one last thought here. The only time any of that minutia could be helpful is if it leads you to accomplishing one of those 4 rocks.
Or better, yeah.
Not in replacement. No, not in replacement or not mimicking the result. But like, what is it that'll get you to the gym? What is it that'll get you moving throughout the day? What is it that'll get you to get your calories under control? Like obviously things like Ozempic are working like gangbusters for many, many people, or fasting is where we arrive. What is it that'll get your protein to the level it's getting to? So that's not taking a supplement for sleep. That's not taking a supplement for lipids or any of that other stuff. It's if there's something that can get one of those rocks happening that you're struggling with, I could see that being the only time where going from minutia to big works. Because if you're not getting the rocks done, well, you're going to get nowhere if you just pile in all of the minutia. Like the rocks have to be there first.
And the cool thing is, if the rocks are there and you do add in some minutia, you'll know if it does something.
Yeah, well, that's what that's the whole point.
Yeah. So just remember that we all in this industry talk about the minutia because it's something to talk about, right? But generally, if John and I ever do it, which I'm sure we do, we mean on top of the rocks, right? Your 4 big rocks have to be there. Maybe there's ways to do those rocks better, and we'll talk about that. But we will go down rabbit holes of minutia, and it's just with the caveat that if there are 4 big rocks are in place, this could be cool to look at.
Yep.
Yeah.
think that's a good place to leave it for today.
Yeah.
All right. So for Brad Pilon, I'm John Barban, and that's your Phi Life Podcast.